Hello, this is Marie Steffenson, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about my watercolor journey and what brought me to the Daniel Smith watercolors. Previously, I had worked with a wide variety of brands. Wonderful thing about watercolor paints is they never go bad. You can keep them for decades. I had worked with a variety of watercolor brands, and I had found one that I was pretty happy with. The composition of their Pigment Red 01, their Burnt Sienna, and their Raw Sienna behaved just phenomenally. And it was a specific brand that didn't have a surfactant in it that I loved how it kept the brush strokes. However, what I didn't love about it was all the additives that it had and the lack of single pigment colors. And so I was looking around, and you of course look at the brands that people say, oh, this is historically the best brand, which is a different one. But what I was observing is that wasn't the case. What the books had said a decade and 2 decades and 3 decades ago was this brand was not correct. I was reading about the history of painting and the history of liturgical art and found lapis lazuli was historically priceless paint, more expensive than gold, and that it was the color used associated with Mary, that a lot of these icons are all done for Mary in lapis lazuli. And I was curious, what does this color actually look like? And I looked around at the brands and couldn't find any. And then I found, probably through the Jean Haynes books, that lapis lazuli exists again. It has been reintroduced, and we now have it in watercolor. I was seduced by this color and wanted to try it, and bought myself a tube of the most expensive paint I thought I could afford, which is a fair price, but it reflects the challenges we were facing in putting my husband through his master's degree at that time. So this is my dot card, and here you have lapis lazuli. I love the granulation factor. So lapis lazuli seduced me away from all the other brands, and started playing with this one, and realized over time that I wanted to try the next color and the next color and the next color. Not in the addictive manner, because I really did budget so hard of putting my husband through school and just saying, okay, I can buy one paint every 6 months, maybe 3 months, maybe. I remember I saved up for a matte cutter, and I saved up for over a year just to be able to buy a matte cutter. Just trying to say, okay, can I be a professional artist? Getting through this season, working with what I've got. And then what happened was the original brand that I had liked changed their formula for their raw umber, for their raw sienna, and the granulation stopped. They had taken it away from pigment brown 7 and took it to pigment red 101, I believe. They had taken it from a natural color to a synthetic color, from something that was a ground up earth, and taken it to something you created in a lab. And it changed the behavior of the paint. And I realized what I loved so much about that paint was the granulation, and how the reticulation that happens when the paint interacts with other paints, and the nature of the behavior of the paint, how it behaves as nature, it behaves naturally as it engages with other paints. And the follow-up was that Daniel Smith had the granulation. It had the colors that were made from something real. It wasn't just made in a lab. They're not all made in a lab. There are products that are also from the earth and from the soil and from semi-precious stones. We live in an era where a lot of everything is fake and not true. You can't trust it. And it is good for my soul to work with something that's behaves naturally in my hands. I also have lab products, synthetics in here, but the granulating ones are very, very uncontrolled. And I like that, and I want that. So I started with Daniel Smith, seduced by their lapis lazuli, and continue with their granulation. And as I continued researching the paints of different companies and my own Daniel Smith company, and as I started learning about what additives are or are not added to paints, and as I started learning about how the companies are run and the ethics of the individual organizations, it's particularly that one I was very, very impressed. Very impressed with the Daniel Smith company. Another aspect that was important to me is I had small children when I started this journey of being a professional artist. Much more than a decade ago. And I realized it was really important to me that a mistake with poisoning never happened in my studio, period, ever. And I recognize as a professional that many of the art products that we use are in fact poisonous and or toxic and or carcinogenic and or need specialized handling and or air filtration system and fresh air. I just realized I have small children. It's important to me that they do not injure themselves because of my career. So that's another reason I went with Daniel Smith, is because of their safety ratings. There's a few products that they still are obliged to put the product warning on for California. But I feel very, very safe using their products, not just because it's a feeling, but also because of the research done into it and into the other companies, and observing this is the safest company that I've observed for not poisoning the world and the population and my children. I hope this is helpful for you. Thank you for listening to my musings. I appreciate you so much, and I wish you all joy in your creative journey.